when heaven remembered my name. Have you ever wondered if God forgot your name? Not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet moments. The ones where you're lying awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, asking questions that never get answered. The ones where your prayers feel like whispers into a void. I used to believe I was strong. I used to believe I was chosen. But there came a night when I wasn't sure I believed anything anymore. I was sitting on the bathroom floor, knees pulled to my chest, the cold tiles pressing against my skin. My body was weak from chemo, my spirit weaker still. The mirror reflected someone I didn't recognize, hollow eyes, thinning hair, a face that had forgotten how to smile. I whispered, "God, do you still know me?" No answer, just the hum of the refrigerator in the next room. The lights had been cut off. My bank account was empty. My phone had stopped ringing weeks ago. I felt invisible. My name is Grace. And this was the moment I stopped believing I mattered. Have you ever watched your life unravel in slow motion? Not with explosions or dramatic betrayals, but with quiet losses. The kind that sneak in, one after the other, until you wake up and realize everything you once held together is now scattered at your feet. That was me. Before the sickness, before the silence, before the breakdown, I was Grace, the girl who had it all figured out. I had a stable job at a local school, a fiancé who prayed with me every morning, and a heart full of dreams. I believed in purpose. I believed in calling. I believed in God's goodness. But life doesn't always follow your script. It started with fatigue, just a little at first. Then came the bruises. The weight loss. The diagnosis. Lymphoma. Stage 3. I remember the doctor's voice, calm, clinical, detached. I remember nodding, pretending to be brave. I remember walking out of the hospital and collapsing in my car, sobbing until my throat burned. That was the first thread. The second thread came when I lost my job, too many sick days, too many hospital visits. "We're sorry," they said. "We wish you well." I smiled, I thanked them. Then I went home and stared at the walls, wondering how I'd pay rent. The third thread was the hardest. My fiancé, the man who once held my hand during prayer, said he couldn't do it anymore. "I didn't sign up for this," he whispered, eyes full of guilt. I didn't argue, I didn't beg, I just watched him walk away. And just like that, my life began to bleed out. I stopped going to church. I stopped answering calls. I stopped believing that anything good could come from this mess. I felt like a burden, a mistake, a woman whose name heaven had erased. I didn't know how to fight anymore. And maybe I didn't want to. The days blurred together into one long, gray nightmare. There's a kind of darkness that doesn't come with nightfall, the kind that settles inside you. I remember the day I stopped fighting. I had just returned from the hospital after another round of chemo. My body was a battlefield and I was losing. My skin was pale, my hair thinning, my limbs trembling from weakness. But it wasn't the sickness that broke me. It was the eviction notice taped to my door. I stood there holding a plastic bag of medication I couldn't afford, staring at the bold red letters like they were written on my soul. Vacate within 7 days. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just folded like paper, like something weightless. I slept on the floor that night, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like old prayers. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. My phone was off. My faith was gone. I remember whispering, "God, if you're still there, I don't have anything left to give." And I meant it. I wasn't angry anymore, just numb. I had nothing left, no strength, no hope, no reason to keep pretending. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of living like this forever. That was my lowest point. And yet, it was the place where something began to shift. I didn't know it then. I couldn't see beyond the pain, but somewhere in the darkness, a light was preparing to break through. Somewhere in the silence, a voice was getting ready to speak. Somewhere in heaven, my name was being whispered with love I couldn't yet imagine. I packed what little I had into 2 garbage bags. The eviction deadline was 2 days away. I had nowhere to go, no family nearby, no friends left who would take me in. I stood in my empty apartment, looking around at the place that had once felt like home. Now it just felt like a tomb. It was raining the day heaven cracked open. I had been sitting outside a shelter, soaked to the bone, shivering in my hospital gown and hoodie. I had nowhere to go, no one to call. I was invisible to the world, just another broken woman on a broken street. Then she appeared, an older woman, maybe in her 70s, holding a bright yellow umbrella. She walked slowly, deliberately, like she had been looking for someone. She stopped in front of me, eyes soft, voice gentle. "You're not forgotten," she said. I blinked. "What?" She knelt beside me, her umbrella shielding us both. "Jesus knows your name, Grace." I froze. She didn't know me. I had never seen her before, but she said my name like it was sacred, like it mattered. She helped me up, took me to her home, fed me warm soup, let me shower, gave me clean clothes, and when I asked her why, she simply said, "Because he told me to." That night, I lay in her guest room, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in months, I felt safe, seen, loved, and I wept, not from pain, but from the terrifying beauty of being remembered. I didn't understand it, I didn't deserve it, but it was real. This stranger had spoken my name with such tenderness, such certainty. How did she know? I hadn't told her anything, yet she looked at me like I was worth saving. I kept replaying her words. "Jesus knows your name." It echoed in my chest like a song I had forgotten how to sing. I reached for the Bible she had left on the nightstand. My hands trembled as I opened it, not even knowing where to begin. The pages fell open to Isaiah 49:15-16. "Can a mother forget the baby at her breast? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. See, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands." I stared at those words, and something inside me cracked wide open. I had spent so long believing I was abandoned, that my suffering meant I was unloved. But here it was, written in ink and eternity, that I was engraved on his hands. I whispered, "You still see me." And for the first time in forever, I felt something stir in the silence. Not a voice, not a vision, just a presence, warm, gentle, real. It was like someone had stepped into the room and wrapped me in light. I didn't have all the answers. I still had cancer. I was still broke. But in that moment, I knew one thing: I wasn't alone. The weight that had been crushing my chest began to lift, not completely, but enough. Enough to breathe, enough to hope, enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, heaven really did remember my name. I fell asleep clutching that Bible to my chest, tears still wet on my face. Healing didn't come with a trumpet blast. It came with a whisper and a choice. The next morning, I asked the woman, her name was Ruth, if I could go to church with her. She smiled like she'd been waiting for me to ask. I sat in the back row, head down, heart pounding. I felt like an imposter, like everyone could see the mess I was. But when the worship started, something happened. The lyrics weren't just words, they were lifelines. "You are not hidden. There's never been a moment you were forgotten," I broke. Tears streamed down my face as I lifted my hands, weak, trembling, but willing. I didn't care who saw, I didn't care what they thought, I just needed him. And I felt him, not in a flash of light, not in a booming voice, but in the stillness, in the warmth, in the way my heart finally exhaled. That was the first step, not toward perfection, but toward presence, toward healing, toward home. You don't notice healing when it starts. It's quiet, subtle, like dawn creeping in after a long night. I began waking up with a strange sense of peace, not because my circumstances had changed, but because I had. I started reading the Bible again, not out of duty, but hunger. I wrote down verses that felt like they were written just for me. I started praying again, not long, eloquent prayers, but raw, honest ones. "Help me, Lord. Thank you for today. I'm still here." Ruth helped me apply for a medical assistance program. I got approved. My treatments became consistent. My strength slowly returned. I even got a part-time job at a local bookstore, a quiet place filled with stories and second chances. I wasn't fixed, but I was healing. And every day I whispered, "Thank you for remembering me." Because now I knew I had never been forgotten, not for a second. Every breath was a gift. Every sunrise was a promise. Have you ever tried to rebuild something with trembling hands? That was me trying to piece together a life that felt shattered beyond repair. I wasn't healed yet, I wasn't whole. But I had something I hadn't felt in a long time, a flicker of hope. I started small. I made my bed every morning. I read one verse a day. I wrote down 3 things I was grateful for, even if one of them was just "I'm still breathing." Ruth encouraged me, but never pushed. She let me find my rhythm, my voice, my faith again. I began volunteering at her church, folding bulletins, sweeping floors, helping in the kitchen. It wasn't glamorous, but it was sacred. I felt useful. I felt seen. And slowly the fog began to lift. I started noticing small things again. The way sunlight filtered through the windows, the sound of laughter in the hallways, the warmth of a smile from a stranger. These tiny moments became treasures to me. Life was returning drop by drop. Joy didn't come back with fireworks. It came back in laughter. One Sunday after service, a little girl tugged at my sleeve and said, "You sing pretty." I hadn't sung in months, but something about her innocence cracked me open. That night, I sat at the piano in Ruth's living room and sang softly, just a whisper of a melody. Tears streamed down my face as I remembered who I used to be. Not the broken woman, not the sick woman, but the worshiper. I started singing again in church. Just background vocals at first, then solos, then leading worship. People said my voice carried healing. I didn't know about that, but I knew it carried my story, and every note was a testimony. Music became my language again, the way I spoke to heaven, the way heaven spoke through me. I sang of pain and redemption, of darkness and light, of being lost and being found, and people listened with tears in their eyes. Have you ever looked in the mirror and seen someone new? It wasn't just my hair growing back. It wasn't just the color returning to my cheeks. It was the light in my eyes, the kind that only comes from surviving the fire and finding God in the flames. I was still in treatment, but my body responded better. My doctors were surprised. My strength returned. I started walking longer distances. I even danced once, just a little during worship. But the real transformation was inside. I no longer feared the silence. I no longer questioned my worth. I no longer begged for miracles. I simply trusted. Trusted that Jesus hadn't just remembered my name, he had never forgotten it. And now I was ready to live like I believed it. I was ready to stop hiding. Stop apologizing for taking up space. Stop believing that I was too broken to be used. God was doing something beautiful in me, and I wanted the world to see. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Pastor Joel asked me to share my testimony at the Women's Fellowship. I froze. I wasn't ready. I wasn't polished. I wasn't healed all the way. But he looked at me with such gentle conviction and said, "Grace, your story is already preaching." I went home and stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. What would I say? How could I speak of pain without falling apart? But then I remembered. I wasn't telling a story of suffering. I was telling a story of survival. Of redemption, of a God who never forgets, so I said yes. The room was small, filled with women who carried their own silent battles. I stood at the front, hands trembling, voice shaking. "I thought God forgot me," I began. And then I told them everything, the diagnosis, the eviction, the heartbreak, the silence. I told them about the stranger with the umbrella, the verse in Isaiah, the whisper in the dark. I didn't preach, I just spoke. And when I finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. One woman came up to me, sobbing. "I thought I was alone," she said, "but your story, it gave me hope." That day, I realized something powerful. My pain had purpose. It wasn't wasted. It wasn't meaningless. Every tear I cried, every night I survived, every moment I thought I couldn't go on, it all mattered, because now it could help someone else keep fighting. I started getting calls from churches, support groups, even hospitals. People wanted to hear the story of the woman who was remembered by heaven. I wasn't famous. I wasn't special. I was just willing. I spoke at youth gatherings. I prayed with cancer patients. I sang at healing services. And every time I saw the same thing, eyes lighting up with hope. It wasn't me. It was Jesus, using my brokenness to mend others, using my silence to speak life, using my scars to point to his grace. One morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't felt pain in weeks. I went for a checkup. The doctor stared at my scans, then at me. "Grace, this is remarkable. The cancer's in remission." I didn't scream. I didn't jump. I just sat there, tears streaming down my face, whispering, "Thank you." Healing had come, not just to my body, but to my soul. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, and every breath felt like a miracle. I called Ruth immediately. She wept with me over the phone, praising God like she'd known all along this day would come. Maybe she had. Maybe that's why she never stopped praying, never stopped believing, never stopped reminding me that I was loved. I looked at myself in the mirror that night and barely recognized the woman staring back. Strong, radiant, alive. This wasn't just physical healing. This was resurrection. I was being raised from death into new life. I look in the mirror now and see someone I never expected, a woman who walks with purpose, who speaks with authority, who sings with fire. I'm not the same Grace who broke on the bathroom floor. I'm the Grace who rose. Not because I was strong, but because Jesus remembered my name. And now I live to remind others, you are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are not too broken to be healed. Heaven still sees you. I started to understand that my story wasn't just for me. It was for every person who felt abandoned, every person who questioned their worth, every person who wondered if God still cared. My testimony became a bridge, connecting broken hearts to a faithful God. And I walked across it every day, helping others find their way home. I never imagined my life would look like this, that my pain would become my platform, that my scars would become my strength. But God had been preparing me all along. I never planned to speak beyond the church walls. But one day, a young woman messaged me online. She had watched a clip of my testimony and wrote, "I was going to end it all until I heard your story." I sat there, phone in hand, tears falling freely. That's when I knew this wasn't just my healing. It was a seed, a spark, a message that needed to be carried into the world, so I began sharing more. Online, in person, in hospitals, in prisons, anywhere hearts were breaking. And every time I said the same thing, "Jesus still remembers your name," the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people who had lost hope, who had given up, who thought they were alone, and suddenly they weren't, because my story reminded them that God still moves, still heals, still cares. I wasn't a professional speaker. I didn't have a degree in theology. I just had a testimony, and that was enough. It started with one video, then another, then a series. People began sharing their own stories of addiction, depression, sickness, heartbreak, and how Jesus met them in the dark. We called it Heaven Remembers. It wasn't a ministry, it wasn't a brand. It was a movement of ordinary people testifying to an extraordinary God. I saw comments from Nigeria, Brazil, India, the US. People saying, "I thought I was forgotten, but now I believe again." And I realized this was bigger than me. This was revival. God was using broken vessels to pour out his love. He was using scarred hands to reach the hurting. He was using whispered prayers to shake the earth. And I got to be a part of it. Not because I was perfect, but because I was willing. Because I said yes when everything in me wanted to say no. Because I chose to believe that my name still mattered, that my story still had power. One morning I stood in front of my mirror, the same one I had once avoided. I looked at my reflection, full hair, clear eyes, a soft smile. But more than that, I saw light, not the kind that comes from healing, the kind that comes from purpose. I whispered, "Thank you, Jesus," not just for remembering me, but for rewriting me, for taking my ashes and giving me beauty, for turning my silence into a song, for making me a living testimony. I thought about everything that had happened, the sickness, the loss, the loneliness, the despair, and I realized something profound. I wouldn't change it, because without the darkness, I wouldn't know the depth of his light. Without the breaking, I wouldn't know the beauty of being made whole. Without the forgetting, I wouldn't know the joy of being remembered. My pain had become my pulpit. My test had become my testimony, and my story was changing lives. If you're reading this, I want you to know something sacred. You are not forgotten. I don't care how deep the pit is. I don't care how long the silence has lasted. I don't care how broken you feel. Jesus still remembers your name. He still walks into hospital rooms, into empty apartments, into broken hearts, into hopeless nights. He still heals. He still restores. He still redeems. And if he did it for me, a woman who had nothing left, he can do it for you. Because heaven doesn't forget what it loves. And you, dear soul, are loved. I know the weight of believing you don't matter. I know the pain of feeling invisible. I know the exhaustion of fighting battles alone. But I'm here to tell you, you're not alone. Not even for a second. Even when you can't feel him, he's there. Even when you can't hear him, he's speaking. Even when you can't see him, he's working. Your name is engraved on his hands. So now I invite you, not to a religion, not to a performance, but to a relationship, to a Savior who sees you, to a God who knows your name. If this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Tell someone they're not alone. Speak hope. Speak life. Be the whisper in someone's dark. Because that's what Ruth was for me. That's what this testimony can be for you. And that's what you can be for someone else. This isn't just my story, it's our story. The story of broken people finding a perfect God. The story of lost souls finding home. The story of forgotten names being called with love. And if you're still waiting for your miracle, don't give up. Heaven is listening. Your prayer isn't lost in the void. Your tears aren't wasted. Your pain isn't meaningless. God is working behind the scenes, preparing something beautiful, something only he could do. And when it comes, you'll know you were never forgotten. I still have hard days, days when the memories resurface, days when fear tries to creep back in. But I've learned something important. Healing isn't the absence of scars, it's the presence of hope. I carry my story with me everywhere I go, not as a burden, but as a banner, a reminder of what God brought me through, a testimony of his faithfulness. And when I meet someone who's drowning in despair, I don't offer them empty words. I offer them my hand, my story, my hope. I tell them what Ruth told me, "You're not forgotten." And I watch as light begins to break through their darkness, just like it broke through mine. This is the work I was born to do, not preaching from stages, but sitting beside the broken, whispering truth into their silence, reminding them that their name still matters, that their life still has purpose, that heaven is still listening. And it all started with a yellow umbrella, a stranger's kindness, a whispered name. Looking back, I can see God's hand in every moment, even the dark ones, especially the dark ones, because that's where I learned to trust. That's where my faith became real. That's where my name was written in the book of life, not because I was good, but because He is. I'm not who I used to be, and I'm grateful for that. The old grace was strong on the outside, but fragile within. The new grace is weak on the outside, but anchored deep. I've learned that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. It's about choosing hope when hope seems foolish. It's about believing you matter when everything says you don't. And it's about remembering that your name, your beautiful, sacred, irreplaceable name, is known in heaven. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know if the cancer will return. I don't know if more storms will come. But I know one thing: Jesus knows my name, and that's enough. This is my story, but it's also yours, because we all have moments when we wonder if we matter, when we question if heaven is listening, when we feel forgotten and alone. But the truth is this: you were never forgot, not for a moment, not for a breath, not for a heartbeat. God saw you before you were born. He knows every hair on your head. He collects every tear you cry. He calls you by name, your real name, the one written in eternity, and He will never let you go. So if you're reading this from a dark place, hear me, dawn is coming. If you're wondering if you can keep going, hear me, you can. If you feel invisible to the world, hear me, heaven sees you. This isn't the end of your story, it's only the beginning. Subscribe for more stories of faith, healing, and redemption. Share this testimony. Let someone know they're not alone, because heaven remembers. And so will they. Your name matters, your story matters, you matter. Never forget that. Heaven never will.